Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I started this podcast a year and a half ago called Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast because I wanted to interview other full-time yoga teachers across the world, people who have been teaching yoga full-time longer than I have or just as long as I have, to kind of see what was their journey like to become a full-time yoga teacher. And what is it like now that they are sustaining themselves in this yoga teaching career? Because those are the questions that I always wanted to know when I was a new yoga teacher, trying to navigate the world of being a full-time yoga teacher. And I think these informations can be so helpful for other yoga teachers who want to be a full-time or who are trying to be a full-time, or maybe you just are interested in what it's like to be a yoga teacher in general. I hope you're enjoying all the interviews and episodes I have been releasing. I release episode once a week on Monday. And I do want to do a couple of updates or a couple of announcements before we get started on today's episode. First of all, I have a mentorship program for yoga teachers where I mentor a group of yoga teachers. And it's an amazing community of yoga teachers who are dedicated and committed to keep learning and keep refining who they are as a yoga practitioner, student, and a teacher. And those who are interested in really living the life with yogic principles. And some of the people in the mentorship programs have been teaching yoga for many years. Some are just out of the 200-hour teacher training program, and some aren't really teaching yet or at the moment. Maybe they used to teach or they just graduated from teacher training, so they haven't started teaching yet. But it doesn't really matter because for me, as long as it's a community of people who's committed and interested in deepening their knowledge about yoga. And they are interested in really living their life with yogic principles. And that's where the beauty happens, I think. I just love having that community and also love to share what I have learned in my decade of teaching yoga full time, but also discuss together how living yoga shows up in our day-to-day life. So anyway, I wasn't planning to talk about my mentorship program. I was trying to say that for my mentorship program, once a month, I bring in guest teacher for a special topic workshop. Not always it's a guest teacher. Sometimes I teach that workshop. But for this month in July of 2025, I have exciting workshop coming up with a guest teacher, AJ. AJ is a physical therapist and yoga teacher, and AJ is going to be teaching a workshop called Yoga Meets Physical Therapy, Teaching Yoga for Healthy Aging. And this workshop is great if you already teach yoga to aging population. We are all aging, every single day, every single second. So even if you're not teaching that population now, you might be in the future, or you might want to know this information about your own practice. So if you want to deepen your knowledge and learn about evidence-based tools to create your yoga classes in a way that it's going to support aging population, aging students, this workshop is for you. This workshop is happening in person in Long Beach, California, July 26th, which is Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. But it will be live streamed as well. So you can join from different time zones, different state, different location. You can still register and join. It will also be recorded. So if you can't be there live, you can still watch the recording if you register for the workshop. AJ is very generous and made this workshop into sliding scale. So the workshop is anywhere between $10 to $60, 60. You get to decide the amount you want to pay between 10 to 60 to join and register for the workshop. And you will also get 2 hours of Yoga Alliance continuing education hours for joining this workshop as well. So what a great opportunity to learn, and you get to decide the amount that feels comfortable in your financial situation. So I would not miss this workshop if I were you. So please come join. I will be there live to learn just alongside with you because I love learning, as you all probably know. And you know me, I'll be probably asking a lot of questions to AJ. So please come join us. It'll be really fun. July 26th, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And I'll put the link on the show notes of the workshop so you can just click that, read more about it, and register if you like. One more announcement that I would like to share with you today is that I am teaching a accessible yoga teacher training for Ra Yoga University. Ra Yoga is a yoga studio based in Southern California. There are multiple studios. I work for the one in Long Beach, and I've been part of their 300-hour teacher training programs for a while now. I come and teach different module for this 300, and it's been a couple of years since I last taught accessible yoga module. So I'm really excited to share with you that I am teaching accessible yoga teacher training module for 300-hour teacher training program at Ra Yoga. It's in Irvine, but it's actually open to any yoga teachers who want to deepen their knowledge on this topic. So you don't have to be part of the 300-hour program at Ra to join this workshop. It's open to anyone, any yoga teachers. And if you want to learn how to make your yoga classes accessible, if you might be teaching at a place where some of your students are having a hard time standing up, getting back down on the floor, or maybe some of your students are injured, or maybe they're wheelchair users. So this training is going to help you become a teacher that can make yoga accessible to your students with all kinds of needs and physical ability due to whatever condition they're in or injuries they might be in. So great training. I love teaching accessible yoga, and some of you know that I teach therapeutic accessible yoga class twice a week at Ra Yoga in Long Beach. And that's one of my favorite classes to teach. I get to share in this training all that I have learned along the way of teaching this class, as well as taking many different trainings to be able to teach this kind of class. And this is a training that I get to share that with you. So I love teaching this training, so I hope you can join. The training is over 2 weekends, 2 Sundays, August 10th and August 17th, 2 to 6 p.m. So total of 8 hours over 2 Sundays. And it is in person in Irvine, California. I'll put the link to the training on the show notes. So if you want to check it out, register, go check out the link on the show notes for accessible yoga teacher training. All right, so let's get started on today's episode. So last week I started this mini short series on the myth, debunking the myth of being a full-time yoga teacher. And last week was the first episode of the 4. And we talked about how there are myths that exist that being a yoga teacher is not a stressful job. And we talked about how it can be stressful and what are some expectations and stereotypes that exist around how yoga teaching is not a stressful job and we're always zen and peaceful. And I also talked about burnout and what are some ways to prevent burning out as a full-time yoga teacher. So this week, I want to talk about the myth that exists that teaching yoga is quote unquote not a real job. When I first became a yoga teacher, my partner at the time told me that, okay, when are you going to get a real job? And that had stuck with me for a really long time. And he kind of treated my yoga teaching as that it wasn't something serious. It was just something on the side. And I wasn't going to make a lot of money doing that, or I wasn't going to be able to sustain it myself teaching yoga. So, quote unquote, it's not a real job. It's something I have heard myself, have experienced from other people. And I want to debunk that. I really want to debunk this myth that it's not a serious job, that it's not a real job, and it's not a professional career choice. I think it is. Teaching yoga is a legitimate path, and it can be a career path. It's serious, or it's real. As a teacher, I try to show up as a professional yoga teacher, and I take my job very, very seriously. And sometimes that is not the stereotype that people have about being a full-time yoga teacher. Maybe being a yoga teacher is undervalued culturally in our society for some people. And I think they might think of teaching yoga as just a side gig, or just people are doing as a hobby, or just maybe people might think it's just another fitness instructor, but that is not true. Maybe for some teacher, it is true. Maybe it is a hobby. Maybe it is something on the side they like to do and they don't put too much effort into or take it seriously. But for me and for many yoga teachers that I know and I get to interview, this is a serious professional career path that we have chosen. If you've been listening to this podcast, you'll know that it's not an easy path. It's not easy to be a full-time yoga teacher. And that is why so many people don't stay. Many people want to become a full-time yoga teacher, but not many succeed in being a full-time yoga teacher, especially long-term, because it's not easy. It's difficult. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat that in this podcast, full-time yoga teacher podcast. I'm actually trying to highlight that in all the interviews that I do, that it's not an easy path. It's not a path for everyone, and that is okay. But for those of us who choose to continue teaching long-term as a full-time gig, we take our job seriously. We fight for our wage. We show up as a professional in the places that we work at, or clients that we see. We have contract and liability form and a waiver, just like any professional business. Yeah. We invest so much time and money and our attention into continuing to refine our skills as a yoga teacher. We are always taking continuing education trainings. We're always learning more. We're always showing up to practice for ourselves, and we're always showing up to teach for our students. And we have invested a lot of time and money and effort into where we are at in our career. And that is something to be taken seriously. And we also love what we do. And I think that is why teachers who's been teaching full-time, who has been teaching for a long period of time, have invested. They really invested into their education, into their craft, into their practice. And not to say people who are no longer full-time did not. That's not true. Like I said, teaching full-time is not for everyone, because it's not an easy path. And also, it may not provide the security that some people need in terms of money or retirement or insurance, healthcare coverage, things like that. It's not for everyone. So I'm not devaluing people who try to be full-time and couldn't do it for long term. And there's also flows and phases in people's lives. So maybe there was a time and phase that they really wanted to be a full-time teacher, and now they no longer want to, or they are putting their focus and energy somewhere else. And that is completely okay. I'm not saying everybody should be a full-time teacher, and I'm not saying every yoga teacher should be a full-time yoga teacher, but it is a serious job. It is a career path that we have chosen, and we take it very seriously. And I think as a teacher, we had to start taking our job seriously as well. Like if you are teaching at a company, corporate yoga or wellness events, or if you have private yoga business, like create a liability form, create an intake form, create a waiver for them to sign, create contracts, and get the help you need to create those things so that people take you seriously as well when you are working at those places, that you are showing up as a professional in those places. And sometimes people might say like, oh, you teach 20 classes a week. That's only 20 hours a week you're working, and you're calling yourself a full-time yoga teacher. But that's not true. If you have been teaching full-time yoga, you know that teaching 20 classes a week does not equal to working 20 hours a week. There's so many hours that goes behind the scene of, let's say, preparing for class, driving to the next location of class, making playlists, and cultivating relationship, collaboration, partnership with different locations, different people. There's just so much work that goes behind the scenes that many people may not see. So, for example, I teach about 18 to 20 classes a week. but I am always working. Just because I don't teach on Friday doesn't mean I'm not working. I'm always working on my computer. There's so much work always to be done, especially on my own business, like podcasting, my online yoga studio, my mentorship, and how I'm planning my retreats. Like all these things are part of work that is not being counted for when people say 20 classes a week must be 20 hours a week. There's so much work that goes in. There's invisible labor, like answering to emails, answering to DMs, answering questions from your students, making flyers and making promotion, writing newsletters. So much work that goes in that is unseen to many. So just know that it's just not the actual hours you're teaching that counts towards your total amount of work you're putting into being a full-time yoga teacher. And most full-time yoga teachers, they are working at multiple places, and many of them have their own business, like online courses. They have a program that they teach. They teach courses. They plan a retreat. They're planning teacher training. They're planning workshop. All of those work and hours are not being seen most of the time. And those are the hours that's not being counted. But just know that there's so much work that goes in that is usually unseen. And I think because of the stereotype that exists that teaching yoga is not a real, quote unquote, real job, or people think that it's because yoga can be a spiritual teaching as well, not just a physical movement that you're teaching. I think there's sometimes a stereotype that we shouldn't get paid what we deserve for the work that we do because it's a service-oriented job or it's work that is kind of like intertwined with spirituality. But we need to get paid as a yoga teacher. We put so many hours and hours and hours into our work, our training, our teaching, everything that we do. We actually deserve to get paid really well, especially if you've been teaching for a long time, because the longer you have been teaching, more teaching experience you have gained, you can start to even ask for more money than when you first started because you have gained so much experience from years of teaching. So we deserve to get paid. And I think we should be carrying ourselves as a professional, show up as a professional, interact with your students, clients, bosses, managers, studio owners as a professional, and that can be a way that we can start to change that narratives that we are teaching yoga is a very serious professional career path. If we carry ourselves that way, I think people will start to see ourselves that way as well. And we don't need to work for free. And like I said, it's not an easy path to be a full-time yoga teacher, energetically, to keep showing up for others, financially, to be able to make money to live and survive, especially if you live in a place like Los Angeles or New York or big cities where living expenses can be expensive. But it's possible. I am a living proof of it's possible. I have not relied on anyone else for money since I started working as a full-time yoga teacher. I have been able to support myself financially as a full-time yoga teacher since I started. Obviously, when I started, I didn't make that as much money as I do now, but it is possible. I'm a living proof, and I have been able to support myself since I started teaching yoga. I have been able to make sure I can go on travel trips a couple times a year since I started teaching, because those are the priority and important things in my life, to be able to go traveling and teach yoga full-time. And that has been possible for me. So, and I don't have anybody supporting my day-to-day. I have been able to fully support myself from the beginning, even till now, financially, to live here, to pay rent, to have groceries, to have a roof over my head, to pay all my bills, to be able to go travel, to be able to pay for continuing education trainings. Like, I have been able to do all of that on my own without help from others from the beginning. So it's possible. And I didn't come with a lot of money saved up from my previous career. I didn't have any inheritance. I didn't have a huge saving. And I was able to do it, and I'm still able to do it. So I think it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. So to wrap up this week's episode, that myth that exists that teaching yoga is quote unquote not a real job, I want to say that if we as a yoga teacher take ourselves seriously and also carry ourselves professionally, show up to places professionally, and we can actually break these stereotypes that exist that teaching yoga is not a real job. We should take our own job seriously and show up professional and take this as a real career path, and don't be half in, half out. Just be fully confident that you are a yoga teacher. And if you're full-time, be confident that you are a full-time yoga teacher and it's possible. It can be done. And I also want to say that it's not for everyone, and I'm not saying it's for everyone. So I'm just sharing my experience. It can be done. It's possible. And I think as a teacher, we can show up and be professional in the way we work and how we run our business, how we interact with others. So this myth doesn't have to exist anymore. So that's it for me today. If you want to share with me your experience of being a full-time yoga teacher, or maybe it was very challenging for you, so you are no longer a full-time teacher. Like, I would love to hear those experiences and your thoughts as well. You can message me on Instagram at Reika Yoga. That's where I'm most active. Or you can message me through my website, www.reikayoga.com. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this podcast episode or just this podcast in general, I would love if you could leave me a 5-star review or subscribe, like, whatever you can do on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. I would appreciate that. And most importantly, share this podcast with others, your friends, your yoga teachers, your colleagues. That would mean a lot to me. All the information is going to be on my show notes for my upcoming accessible yoga training, as well as upcoming workshop with AJ on how to teach yoga to aging population. So I hope you can join me on one of those upcoming offerings. Otherwise, I will speak to you next week. Next week's mini series is going to be about you have to be flexible or fit or thin or young to be a yoga teacher. So that's the myth we are going to talk about next week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.